All right, everyone. Mattgaetz is again leading the charge, this time to try to defund FISA. Now, FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, is up for renewal this year, and he's going to try to, and other Freedom Caucus members are organizing to try to cut it loose. Now, what FISA pertains to on paper is that it's for spying on foreign subjects, so individuals in other countries. They may be doing espionage, terrorism, whatever it happens to be, and so you spy on them. And this is something all countries do if they have the technological means to do so. They attempt to gather data on foreign targets. China is the most notorious. They don't care what they sweep up, and all the Zoomers actually help them to do so by using TikTok. Millennials did by using Facebook. But now, by the way, Threads is dead, so we'll be talking about that certainly later. Possible live stream today. Mattgaetz is now trying to get rid of FISA's capability of being funded, because supposedly it's for foreign targets. What's the problem? Those foreign targets don't just involve themselves in espionage, terrorism, etc. They also have social circles. The idea that some Al-Qaeda agent doesn't have their own social life and that they're a one-dimensional individual who only ever talks about jihad is completely and totally fundamentally false. Oftentimes, these individuals, just socially, about innocuous things, are talking to American citizens. If you, therefore, are gathering up all of the data on all of their conversations, you are violating the Fourth Amendment rights of American citizens pertinent to that foreign investigation. So really, the concept of it being the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act is a misnomer. It's sort of like the usage of the term Patriot Act. What the hell does it have to do with patriotism? Well, basically nothing. FISA involves itself at least 50-50 with spying on American citizens by default simply because of the way in which it's conducted. And its scope is virtually limitless. They don't need any authorization. They don't need to go before a court and explain why an American's communiques were swept up. We've had this conversation now for years. We were told originally, with this particular subvariant of U.S. espionage, which is basically what it is. They call it surveillance. It's the same thing. It's just it depends on if it's your own country or another country doing it to you. It's sort of like one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. You can debate over that in the comments all you want. Some cases it's apt. In some cases, when you're cutting the hearts out of children, I would say that's not really being a freedom fighter. I think there's an objective measure to that too, subjective side to it. The mislabeling of this program is for sanitary purposes to get the public to allow it to continue. If the public were more acutely aware of the scope of it, and the Fourth Amendment, especially technically First Amendment violations that pertain to the FISA spying, and arguably the 10th Amendment at some level, depending on whether the state happens to condone its citizens having their cell phone records queried constantly, it's egregiously unconstitutional. So it should be ended. I support Mattgaetz completely in this. I'd like to see other people come forward. Yay or nay, do you believe in spying on U.S. citizens by default? It's very, very convenient. I would say there's a very little chance, unfortunately, of them successfully ending the FISA system, the spying on U.S. citizens. Despite its egregious unconstitutionality, there are so many warmongers and anti-Fourth Amendment figures within especially the Democratic but also the Republican Party that it forms a majority of the House. It certainly forms a majority of the Senate. It would be odd if they were able to make this work. They should. I support Mattgaetz. You should go forward, young man, and do the best that you can. But don't expect victory, unfortunately. Expect to be stonewalled by many of your fellow Republicans. In the end, they might be able to scrape together 50, 60 people that are willing to stand against this spying. In the Senate, you'll have like Rand Paul and a few others, but do you think McConnell would vote in favor of anything that would cause FISA to end? I don't think so. I think that if you parse it out of the budget, Mitch McConnell would throw a bitch tantrum. He'd throw a cocaine fit, cocaine turtle, Mitch McConnell himself. Well, I think that this is bad for the United States. I think that, terrorists will get you. Just think of the children. They'll trot out the same lines they used to defend the Patriot Act. Think of the children. People will die. It's basically, it's funny, the Republicans use the same fucking arguments on things like Ukrainian weapons shipments and FISA that the Democrats use for the AR-15. Has anyone noticed the similarity here? Because Pepperidge Farm definitely has. The FISA spying is terrible. And there was a time, a peak awareness of domestic surveillance and outrage about it was basically the middle of the Obama era. It's petered off since then. Under Trump, Republicans wouldn't say anything because they didn't want to tarnish the administration, even though, again, one of the major mistakes Trump made was not letting something like FISA go. By the way, I don't think any of the other candidates, based on what I saw from Mike Pence especially the other day, the GOP ain't going to tackle this issue. The Freedom Caucus will, and it's definitely to their ethical and ideological credit. I'm glad that I like these people on other counts, although I could do with a little bit less of the Jesus stuff from Lauren Boebert. I will tolerate it in the name of stopping something like FISA. But don't expect it to work. I would point out further, let's say that you do end FISA. So domestic surveillance on the U.S. side, bye-bye. You're no longer allowed to do that. You don't have the funding, so you don't have the resources to do it. On paper, you can, because no one's challenged it, unfortunately, in a constitutional court, where they should. It should be re-challenged. We certainly got a Band-Aid on a gaping wound with the NSA spying at the last minute, with Ted Cruz breaking rank during the filibuster that Rand Paul led. They had the capability of stopping it completely, but then Ted Cruz turned turncoat. Why am I not surprised at this? There's a reason why he's in the same category as Dan Crenshaw for me. In fact, he's basically the prototype off which Dan Crenshaw was minted. He's slightly better at times. That's all I can say in his favor. He's still Cruz the loser. What would happen? Well, the problem is the United States has data sharing agreements with other countries. If the British spy on a U.S. citizen, which is the full goal of, or part of the goal of FISA anyway, it's not about foreign intelligence, it's about domestic spying too. What can the U.S. and Britain do? Data sharing agreement. The U.S. can spy on British citizens. Well, it doesn't matter if they violate the British citizens' privacy rights, because the U.S. government's not the British government. If the British then, in turn, do the same to U.S. citizens, no constitutional segment is violated. The Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to the British government. They don't recognize it because it's not part of their own governmental system. And so we can spy on one another and data share. Well, how lovely, a Fourth Amendment workaround. They're doing this constantly. It's sort of like how the government pressures, jawbones actually, tech firms into censoring people for pedestrian political opinions. They've done this thousands of times over the last few years. Look at the Twitter files. Look at the queries at Facebook or Meta in general. Zuckerberg talked about that on Joe Rogan. Look at Dorsey has talked about this. The people at YouTube get queries for taking down material which is politically inconvenient. They get it from governments all over the world. I'm supposed to believe the U.S. government's the only one that doesn't do that to its own citizens. Everyone else does. India, Turkey, Pakistan, Russia, all the other countries do it. Why the hell would I suppose that there's only one shining Christian example of a nation that truly upholds its civic structure and believes in the Star-Spangled Banner? That's horseshit. Only a complete retard would believe that. You have to have like a 5th grade mentality to believe that most of the people in the government actually think that way and aren't a bunch of corrupt sleazebags. I've known that since the 90s. I've known that since the Bill Clinton being impeached for perjuring himself before Congress. I support Gaetz. It's a good idea. It should happen. But even if it does, the spying will continue. It's just they have to use another methodology in order to spy on people. And I don't think they'll be, in the end, successful at ending FISA spying. Make a big deal about it. Use the de facto bully pulpit that members of the Freedom Caucus have, because you get all the attention whenever you speak. You'll get called a bigot and shit, but at least you're on the news. And use that to your advantage. Troll, get attention. Make sure that it gets on the front page. Mattgaetz, evil rapist and trafficker, is trying to end the government's ability to spy on foreign targets. He's obviously pro-ISIS. That's what they'll run with, but some people will see through that when they dig through the middle of the paragraph that most people won't read. That will fall onto content creators like myself. We're more than willing to do that, but you've got to get it out into the news cycle first so that we can ratio them and explain why they're fucking wrong. That's about all. Peace out.